The storm rolled in from the north like a herd of angry cattle, thunder cracking against the plains, lightning spilling down the sky in crooked white forks. Out there, through the sheets of rain, a small cabin stood against the dark. Its windows glowed faintly, not bright enough to be called light, but enough to show that someone still believed in warmth. Inside, a young woman moved between the fire and the door, wrapping her shawl tighter. Her name was Clara Mayfield, and she had nothing in this world except that one-room cabin and the kindness she'd learned to never let die. No matter how cruel the years had been, the wind howled, and over it came a knock, slow, hesitant, like someone unsure if they even deserved to be heard. Clara froze, her heart tightening. Folks didn't come this far out unless they were lost. Or dangerous. She stepped to the door and cracked it open. Two figures stood in the rain, a man and a boy who couldn't have been more than 10. The man's hat dripped, his coat soaked through and his breath fogged in the cold. But his eyes, sharp pale blue under the brim, held something quiet and steady. "Ma'am," he said, voice low and hoarse, "we don't mean trouble. Just looking for a place to keep dry till morning." Clara looked past him at the boy, shivering, clutching a bundle to his chest. Something inside her softened. "There's not much room," she said carefully, "but you can come in." The man tipped his hat. "Much obliged." They stepped inside, the man's boots leaving trails of mud across the wooden floor. The boy kept his head low, whispering a thank you before sitting near the fire. Clara poured what little coffee she had left into a tin cup and handed it to the man. He took it, nodded once. "Name's Jack Rowe, and this here's my son, Eli." Clara gave a small smile. "Clara Mayfield, you're welcome to stay till the rain quits." For a long moment, there was only the crackle of the fire. Jack's face was unreadable, the kind of face that had seen too many miles, too many winters. Yet when he looked at his boy, something gentler stirred there, something that told Clara this man had once known love. She didn't ask questions. Out here, questions could kill faster than a bullet. Later that night, after Eli had fallen asleep on a pile of quilts, Clara caught Jack staring out the window. The rain had eased, but the wind still carried a low hum through the trees. "You're far from town," she said softly. "Most travelers don't take this road." Jack didn't turn. "We weren't looking for a road. Just a place that wasn't full of people telling us what we are." Clara frowned. "And what are you?" He finally faced her. "Depends who you ask." She saw the exhaustion behind his eyes, the kind of weight that didn't come from work but from running. And yet, his hands were clean, his voice calm. Something about him didn't fit the picture of an outlaw. "You don't have to explain," she said. "You're safe here for tonight." Jack nodded once, like that meant more than he'd ever admit. As the night deepened, Clara sat beside the fire, listening to the storm fade. She couldn't help but glance at the man and his son, how the boy's small hand rested against his father's sleeve, even in sleep. It had been years since she'd seen that kind of bond. Something about them unsettled her, not in a fearful way, but in a way that stirred a long-buried ache. She had once dreamed of a family, of a husband who'd build her a better life. But the world had different plans. Poverty and bad luck had taken almost everything from her, except her heart, stubborn as a mule. Outside, a wagon creaked somewhere in the distance. Jack's eyes flicked toward the sound, every muscle in his body tensing. "You expecting someone?" Clara asked. He shook his head slowly. "No, but somebody might be expecting me." For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the rain dying against the roof and the faint rattle of wind through the cracks. Whatever road this stranger had come from, it wasn't one he could stay on for long. And Clara, poor kind Clara, didn't yet know that the man she'd just taken in wasn't some wandering drifter. He was one of the wealthiest cattlemen in 3 territories, hiding not from the law, but from his own life. And before dawn came, that truth and the choices it brought would change both of them forever. The morning came slow and silver. Mist crawled across the plains, wrapping the world in silence. A thin stream of light slipped through the cracks of Clara's cabin and touched Jack's weathered face. He was already awake, sitting by the hearth, his hat low over his brow, his eyes fixed on the fire as if it held the answers to something too heavy to speak. Clara moved quietly, trying not to wake the boy. She boiled what little cornmeal she had left and poured 2 tin bowls of mush. "You sleep any?" she asked softly. Jack shook his head. "Didn't come easy." Clara smiled faintly. Storms don't let anyone rest easy out here. He looked up at her, a shadow of a grin crossing his face. I ain't talking about the weather. That made her pause. There was something behind his tone, regret maybe, or fear. The kind that doesn't show itself loud, just lingers in a man's breath. She set the bowls down. You don't owe me your story, Mr. Rowe, but if you're running from someone, I ought to know. He stirred the cornmeal once before answering. Not running from, maybe. Running towards something I should have been a long time ago. Before Clara could ask, the boy stirred. Pa? Jack's voice softened immediately. Morning, son, eat up. We'll be moving soon. Eli rubbed his eyes, yawned, then looked around. Can we stay a bit, Pa? Feels nice here. Clara's heart pulled at that. It had been years since anyone had called her place nice. Jack hesitated, then said, just for a spell. But the peace didn't last long. By midday, a rider appeared on the ridge, small in the distance, but clear enough to send a prickle down Clara's neck. He didn't ride like a neighbor. His back was too straight, his horse too fine. Jack saw him too. He stepped out to the porch, watching in silence as the figure disappeared into the haze. Friend of yours? Clara asked. Jack didn't answer right away. No, but he might be looking for me. Why? He took a long breath. Because some folks can't stand a man walking away from what they think he owes. Before she could press, a creak came from the road, wheels grinding through mud. Then voices. Clara's stomach sank. 2 wagons rolled into view, both bearing the mark of Rowe cattle and freight burned into the wood. Men climbed down, clean coats, polished boots, the kind of faces that had never gone hungry. One of them, a tall man with a silver vest, called out, Mr. Rowe, you've gone and worried half of Abilene. Mr. Connors sent us to fetch you back. Clara turned to Jack, her eyes wide. You're that Rowe? The man who owns? Jack raised a hand gently. I was. Don't mean much out here. But the men outside didn't see it that way. Sir, the one in the vest said, stepping closer, your absence has caused quite a stir. The papers say you're missing. Your partners are waiting on contracts. Jack cut him off. Contracts'll wait. Tell Connors I ain't coming back. The man frowned, glancing at the cabin at Clara. Sir, forgive me, but this isn't the place for you. We'll get you to the hotel in town. Warm bed, proper food. You don't belong here. Something in Clara broke a little at that. She knew what that meant. You don't belong here. The way rich folks said it, soft but sharp as a blade. Jack's eyes hardened. Maybe this is exactly where I belong. The man's tone shifted, cold now. Your wife's been asking, sir. She said if we found you, we were to remind you of your name. And your responsibility. Clara stepped back. Wife. Jack's jaw tightened. You tell her I've remembered all I need to. The man studied him a moment longer, then tipped his hat. As you wish, Mr. Rowe, but the world doesn't take kindly to a man walking away from gold. They turned their wagons around and left, dust rising behind them. When the sound faded, Clara finally spoke. You lied to me. Jack turned slowly. Didn't lie. Just didn't say what wouldn't matter to you. It matters, she said, voice trembling. I thought you were just like the rest of us. Someone with nothing to lose. He looked at her then, eyes heavy. Maybe I still am. Outside, the sky was clear again, cruelly clear. Clara didn't know it yet, but by opening her door that night, she'd done more than give shelter to a stranger. She'd given him the first reason in years to question what kind of man he really was. And that reason was standing right in front of him, barefoot, poor, and too honest for her own good. By evening, the air grew still again, the kind of stillness that made the prairie feel like it was holding its breath. The sky bled orange and red over the horizon, and the last of the sunlight touched the cabin's walls like fire on worn wood. Jack stood outside, leaning against the fence post he'd helped fix earlier, watching the world go quiet. Eli chased a grasshopper near the barn, laughter echoing across the field. For a moment, it looked almost normal. A man, his boy, a bit of peace. But peace never lasted long in Jack Rowe's world. From the south road came the faint rumble of hooves, slow, deliberate, too many to be travelers. Jack straightened, his hand instinctively resting near his belt, though he carried no gun now. Clara stepped out onto the porch, her hands dusted with flour. What is it? Jack's gaze didn't move. Riders, 4, maybe 5. Friends of yours? No, he said, his voice hardening. Those are Connor's men. The name hit the air like the snap of a whip. Clara didn't know the man, but she'd heard the stories. Harlan Connors, the rancher banker who owned half the county and half the law along with it. If Jack had walked away from him, then trouble wasn't far behind. The riders came into view. Dark coats, polished saddles, rifles strapped tight. They stopped 100 yards from the cabin, the dust curling around their horses like smoke. One man dismounted, a tall figure with a scar running from ear to jaw. "Mr. Rowe," he called. "Boss said to bring you back, one way or another." Jack didn't move. "Tell your boss I ain't part of his game anymore." The man grinned, cold and wolfish. "You think you can just walk away from a deal that big? From a wife wearing silk he bought with your name?" Clara's heart pounded. Eli ran to his father's side, clutching his arm. "Go inside, son," Jack said quietly. The men laughed. "He's got the boy with him too, huh? You planning to raise him in the mud now? The lady back home must be proud." Jack's eyes darkened. "That's enough." The one with the scar spat in the dirt. "It'll be enough when you come back and sign what's yours. Otherwise we got orders to bring you in." Clara stepped forward before she could stop herself. "He's not going anywhere with you." All eyes turned to her. Her dress was faded, her hands rough, but her stance, proud and steady, was enough to quiet them for a heartbeat. The scarred man's smirk returned. "And who might you be, miss?" "Someone who don't answer to men who threaten a father in front of his child." He chuckled low. "Careful, girl, you don't know who you're talking to." Jack's voice came out like gravel. "You heard her. Leave." The men exchanged looks. Then one raised his rifle slightly, not quite aiming, just reminding everyone who held the power. The air was thick, heavy with the unspoken. A hawk cried somewhere in the distance. Even the wind seemed to stop. Then, slowly, the scarred man mounted his horse. "You got till sunrise, Rowe. Either you ride back to Connor's place on your own, or we take you back ourselves. You can keep the girl here to sweep up what's left." They turned and rode off, hooves pounding into the twilight. Clara watched them disappear into the haze, her breath shaking. "They mean it," she whispered. "They'll be back." Jack nodded once, still staring after them. "They always come back." Eli looked up, wide-eyed. "Pa, are they going to hurt Miss Clara?" Jack knelt beside him. "Not if I can help it." The boy clung to his father, and for the first time, Clara saw fear in Jack's eyes, not for himself, but for the boy. She swallowed hard. "You could go, you could take Eli and run tonight before they get here." He looked at her, that quiet steadiness back in his voice. "I've been running my whole life, Clara. Maybe it's time I stopped." The lantern flickered behind them, throwing long shadows on the ground. The prairie had gone silent again, save for the rustle of dry grass and the echo of faraway thunder. Clara took a slow breath. "Then we'll stand together." Jack turned to her, surprised. She nodded, trembling but firm. "You gave me back something I thought I'd lost. Faith. I ain't letting men like that take it again." Jack studied her face for a long moment, the dirt on her cheeks, the courage in her eyes, and in that moment, under a sky bruised with coming storm, something passed between them, quiet, powerful, and wordless. They both knew what sunrise would bring, but for the first time in a long while neither of them felt alone. The night stretched long and restless. The wind picked up again, whispering through the prairie grass like the land itself was warning them. The moon was high and pale, laying silver across the cabin roof. Inside, the fire burned low, a single orange glow in the dark. Eli slept against Clara's lap, wrapped in an old quilt that smelled faintly of smoke and sage. She brushed his hair from his forehead and looked toward Jack, who sat near the window, rifle across his knees. His eyes hadn't left the horizon for hours. "You don't have to do this alone," she said softly. He didn't turn. "You got a child in your arms. I won't bring a fight into your home." She smiled sadly. "This place stopped being just mine the moment you knocked on that door." Jack's jaw flexed. "I should have kept riding. Should have known Connors wouldn't let me walk away clean. What happened between you and him?" Jack took a long breath, as if pulling memories out of the dark. "I built that empire with my own hands. 20 years. Cattle, freight lines, land as far as the eye could see. Then Connors came. Slick talker, money man. Said he could double what I had. Truth was, he just wanted control. When I started seeing the kind of deals he made, paying off lawmen, throwing farmers off land they'd worked for generations, I told him I was out. He said no man walks away from him. Guess we're gonna find out. Clara listened quietly. And your wife? Jack's eyes lowered. She liked the money more than the man. Didn't take long before she and Connors had more in common than they should have. The fire popped. The sound made both of them flinch. So you left, Clara said. He nodded. Left it all. Just me and Eli. Figured I'd rather my boy grow up poor and honest than rich and cruel. She looked down at the sleeping child and whispered, He's lucky to have you. Jack's voice softened. I ain't sure about that, but I'm trying. They sat in silence for a long time. Outside, a coyote called somewhere in the distance. The night air smelled like rain again, thick and heavy. Then Clara spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. You know, folks think poor people don't understand much about choice. They think we live how we do because we have to. Truth is, sometimes being poor's the only way to stay clean. Jack turned then, meeting her eyes. She went on, My pa was a miner. Died when I was 13. After that, I worked any place that'd have me. Laundry, cooking, fields. Folks offered help sometimes, but it always came with a hand that took something back. So I stayed alone. Figured hunger was easier to live with than shame. Her voice cracked on that last word and she looked away. Jack set the rifle down and leaned forward. I ain't got nothing to be ashamed of, Clara. She laughed softly, bitterly. Tell that to the town. They look at me like dirt that won't wash off. He studied her a moment longer. Then they're blind, 'cause you got more decency in your little finger than any of them. For a long moment neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't empty now. It was full, heavy with something unspoken and alive. The firelight caught her face, tired, strong, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with prettiness. Jack saw the life she'd fought to hold on to. And for the first time since his wife betrayed him, he felt something stir that wasn't bitterness. He stood slowly, crossed the floor, and crouched beside her. Thank you, he said quietly. She looked at him puzzled. For what? For letting me remember what good looks like. Her eyes shimmered in the light, and for a heartbeat, the whole world seemed to stop. No storm, no riders, no past. Just two souls who had both been left behind by the world, finding a little peace in each other's silence. Then Eli stirred and murmured, half asleep. Pa, it's okay, right? Jack brushed his son's hair and whispered, Yeah, son, that's okay. But outside, a faint glow flickered on the southern horizon, lanterns moving in a slow line toward them. Clara saw it through the window, her breath catching. Jack, he followed her gaze, eyes narrowing. They're coming early. The boy woke fully now, fear in his small voice. Are they bad men, Pa? Jack picked him up, kissed his head. No, son, just men who forgot what's right. Then he turned to Clara. Get your things ready. If anything happens, you take him and go north. Don't look back. Clara stood, her voice trembling but sure. I'm not leaving you. Jack looked at her, a long, steady look that said more than words ever could. You've already done more than anyone ever has. The lantern lights drew closer, flickering like fireflies across the dark. The night wasn't over yet, and neither were they. By dawn, the horizon was a bruise of red and grey. The riders came slow, the sun glinting off their rifles, their silhouettes long and sharp against the light. Clara stood by the window, her heart hammering in her chest as dust rose behind the horses like smoke from some distant fire. Jack stepped outside, calm and steady, the kind of calm that only came when a man had already made peace with what might come. Eli clung to the doorway, tears trembling on his lashes. Stay inside, Jack said softly. Whatever happens, don't move. Clara gripped the boy's shoulders. Her fingers shook, but her voice didn't. We'll be right here. The riders fanned out before the cabin, 5 in total. At the center was the scarred man from before, Connor's enforcer. He dismounted, his boots sinking into the wet earth. Morning, Roe, he said, voice slick as oil. Didn't figure you'd have the nerve to wait for us. Jack's face was still unreadable. Never ran from a man with a gun, not about to start now. The enforcer smirked. You think this is about courage? You left a life most men would kill for. Connors ain't mad you walked. He's mad you made him look small. Jack's eyes flicked to the horizon. "A man like Connors can't be made small. He already is." The smirk vanished. The enforcer nodded once to his men. "And this?" But before they could raise their rifles, Clara stepped out of the cabin. Her shawl whipped in the wind, her bare feet sinking into the mud. "Enough!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the morning air. "There's a boy in there." "You shoot him. You'll be killing a child who don't even know what his father's done." The riders hesitated, their rifles wavering. The scarred man looked annoyed. "Lady, this ain't your fight." "It is," she said fiercely, "because I gave him a roof when he had nowhere to go, because I fed that boy when you'd have let him starve. You call yourselves men, but you come to kill one for choosing to walk away from your gold? What kind of men are that?" Her words hung there, trembling, raw, true. Even the wind seemed to hush. Jack looked at her, stunned. He'd expected fear, but what stood in front of him was something else entirely. Defiance, born from all the years she'd spent being small and poor and invisible. The scarred man frowned, lowering his voice. "You got a fire in you, girl, but don't mistake mercy for weakness." He aimed his rifle. And that's when Jack moved. He stepped in front of Clara, arms wide. "You'll shoot me, not her. But you tell Connors something before you pull that trigger. Tell him the man he owned is gone. Tell him all the money in the world can't buy a soul that remembers what it is." For a second, no one breathed. Then the enforcer hesitated, just long enough for another sound to break through the stillness. Hooves, fast and hard, coming from the north. The riders turned, startled. Over the ridge came a small group of townsfolk, men on horseback, some with shotguns, some with nothing but shovels and courage. Clara recognized them. They were the same men who'd ignored her for years, passed her by on market days like she didn't exist. But now they'd come. Maybe because word had spread. Maybe because they'd remembered the kind of kindness she'd never stopped showing. The scarred man cursed. "This ain't over, Ro." Jack met his eyes. "It is for today." The enforcer spat in the dirt, swung into his saddle, and motioned to the others. "Let's go. Ain't worth the trouble." They rode off, disappearing into the dust, leaving silence behind them. For a long while, no one moved. Then the townsmen dismounted, one of them, old Marshal Greaves, tipping his hat to Jack. "Word was you were hiding here. Didn't seem right to let Connor's men handle it their way." Jack nodded. "Much obliged, Marshal." The Marshal looked between him and Clara. "Seems to me you both handled it fine yourselves." When the crowd dispersed, the world felt suddenly wide again. The wind carried the scent of wet earth and sunrise. Jack turned to Clara. "You didn't have to do that." She smiled faintly. "So I didn't have to stay." Eli ran out then, straight into his father's arms. Jack lifted him high, holding him tight. His eyes were wet, not from fear, but from something cleaner. Later that morning, when the sun finally climbed clear of the hills, Jack walked to the edge of the field. He turned to Clara, who stood in the doorway, her hair glinting gold in the light. "I don't know what comes next," he said. "Neither do I," she answered. "But maybe that's the good part." He nodded, looking out over the land that seemed, for the first time in years, like it might hold peace instead of regret. Then, slowly, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather pouch, gold coins heavy and shining. He pressed it into her hand. "For what you gave us," he said. "For one night. That changed everything." She looked down at the gold, then back up at him. "I didn't do it for this," he smiled. "I know." "That's why it's worth something." The wind stirred the grass, the morning light warm on their faces, and as the man who once had everything rode off down the dirt road with his son beside him, the poor young girl who had nothing stood watching, no longer poor in the ways that mattered, because in a world full of men chasing gold, she had given away something far rarer, mercy, and it had saved them both.